You're listening to This Motorcycle Life, conversations about why we ride. Episode 42, Daring Greatly. I'm Bruce Philp, and thank you for listening. Well, we hear it all the time, this tribal wisdom that says motorcyclists can improve by riding dirt bikes. But what exactly is it that we're missing? Well, you're about to meet someone uniquely qualified to answer that question, someone whose threshold for personal growth might even be a little higher than yours or mine. We're going to take a long overdue trip to the world of knobby tires, and it turns out that exploring the limits of traction barely scratches the surface of what it has to offer. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first, let's take care of a little business. This has been a great month for hearing from listeners, which I know I always appreciate. We've also managed to win a few more positive reviews on podcasting platforms, which helps people find This Motorcycle Life. So I'm grateful for that. But best of all this month, I've recently heard from a number of those new listeners, many of whom were starting from the very first episode. So this episode's acknowledgement is especially for them. Welcome, and thanks for gambling your precious time on this show. I really hope it's worth it, and please let me know, either way. And to everyone else, well, as always, thanks for sticking with me. If you want to show even more support, a gentle reminder that the Movember Foundation can really use any help you can give them. You can find your way to the podcast donation page by visiting the show notes for this episode. Next month is Movember's make or break month for fundraising, so there's literally no better time to get around to finally making that donation. And if you want to reward yourself with a nice t-shirt, say, well, those show notes are also where you'll find the official podcast merch store. And with that, why don't we get started? You've probably noticed that this podcast doesn't devote much time to industry trends. It's not that I'm not interested in that stuff. I am, and I know it matters. It's just that that kind of information doesn't usually intersect with the kinds of stories we tell here. This has always been more of a people podcast. But earlier this year, one press release from America's Motorcycle Industry Council caught my eye, and I couldn't quite bring myself to hit delete. It had to do with growth in the powersports industry since the pandemic began, and specifically growth in the sales of off-road motorcycles. Dirt bike sales, it turns out, grew massively during 2020, grew by nearly half over the previous year, 46.5% to be precise. And sometimes a statistic becomes a people story, and that's what I think happened here. And I suddenly realized that I haven't been nearly curious enough about this world, which is pretty terrible considering how many riders inhabit it, and pretty terrible considering that the dirt was in a sense where it all started even for me. And even more than that, riding dirt bikes, if you'll excuse that very broad term, is famously a skill builder for street riders, something most experts recommend we all try at some point in our development. And maybe most of all, anytime you catch a glimpse of somebody riding one of these things, which isn't often unless you're looking for it, they seem to be having a ridiculously good time. So there was going to be a dirt bike episode. And then, as if by magic, the motorcycle community served up the perfect story, and an amazing person to tell it. If you're an NHL fan, Scott Thornton probably doesn't need an introduction. Scott played 18 seasons of professional hockey, and while he'll shortly tell you that he regrets not winning a Stanley Cup, it would be hard to call his career anything less than impressive. What they call a power forward, Scott played for some of the world's most legendary franchises, starting with the Toronto Maple Leafs and followed by tours with the Edmonton Oilers, Montreal Canadiens, San Jose Sharks, and LA Kings. He was once described as one of the fittest players in the NHL, and the person who said that said it at the end of his career. A lifelong rider, it was no surprise that Scott turned to motorcycles when he finally retired at 38. But given hockey's all-consuming demand for performance, teamwork, and a gritty work ethic, it was going to take more than just a motorcycle to fill the void it left. And what it took turns out to hold some clues about why dirt bike riders are some of the happiest people in motorcycling. I reached Scott Thornton at his home near Collingwood, Ontario. Hey Scott, how are you doing this morning?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, and for a few reasons. I mean, one is it's fun to have a guy from my hometown on the podcast, which I've never had the privilege before. And the other is that it's kind of about two things that are both interesting to me. One is you, and the other is the subject of riding in the dirt, which this podcast has really not paid nearly enough attention to. So, I guess double thanks for doing this. And if you like, why don't we sort of dive in right where those two subjects meet? Tell me about your journey as a rider, which I have a feeling kind of happens in two chapters, sort of pre-hockey and post-hockey. Is that right?
Yeah, let me just start by saying I grew up the youngest of four boys. And so as a baby, my oldest two brothers, which are 9 and 10 years older than me, both raced dirt bike, raced motocross. And so I basically grew up at a track as a newborn. And then every weekend we were camping, usually like Holly Gully down London Way. And,
sure.
But that, I fell in love with motorcycles that early and was a little, collected beer bottles running around a racetrack every weekend and had a lot of fun. Unfortunately, my hockey kind of got pretty serious for me at a younger age where, it wasn't really in my best interest to start riding dirt bikes.
Right.
So I didn't really get into off-road riding until, late in my hockey career. And, I did, however, start riding motorcycles. I got my license early, right away, and then I bought my first Harley Davidson when I was 19, and so I was riding Harleys basically my whole playing career, and did a lot of cross country touring and stuff like that on that bike, but never really got into dirt until later on, and when I was playing in San Jose.
Right.
And so then I kind of fell in love with it again, just because I had some neighborhood friends that were riding around our community, and but it was kind of against the rules to do that. So I kept that really quiet, and obviously I rode very reserved, and we just did a bit of trail riding and a bit of track stuff around the San Jose area, but that was kind of the extent of it until about 5 years ago here as a retired athlete.
Yeah. And how, it's interesting. I did not know that you also rode on the street. So that makes a ton more sense, because what I could determine from research was that you'd ridden dirt bikes as a kid and then started again, as you say, post-career. So this makes a little more sense, because what you would go on to do seems kind of like the deep end to me.
Yeah.
Right. So, which I guess begs the question. So I understand. So I get why you would be drawn back to dirt bikes. I mean, that's, being a rural kid, they're almost unavoidable. And there is a certain kind of safety and sort of regressive fun in them. But you ended up specifically getting into enduro riding and, hard enduro riding. I think digging around, I saw that you'd entered a rally raid in Africa at one point, the Rally du Maroc, which I think is like over 2,000 kilometers from 5 stages. And you did the Corduroy here in Canada, which calls itself Canada's toughest race. And you did the Red Bull Outliers. So I'm kind of wondering, like, of all the ways a dirt biking kid from the Ontario flatlands could come to the sport, and really essentially in your 40s, why this one? Why hard enduro?
Yeah, good question. First of all, I didn't know the sport existed until about 5 years ago. And, I retired from my playing days at 38 years old and moved back to Ontario here. And again, still riding Harleys and, looking for the nicest asphalt roads that we could find.
Mm-hmm.
And I met one of my neighbors, and who had a dirt bike. And he was like, man, you should come ride dirt bikes with us. And I was like, yeah, I'm a little too old and broken to be, hitting 70 and 80 foot double jumps on a track. Like, I just think those days are gone now. Right. And, anyway, he goes, no, you don't understand. He goes, we don't do that. It's like riding a mountain bike through the woods, and but you have an engine, you have a motor. And I had no idea. And so I went on a borrowed bike one day with these guys in our area, and then a whole new world kind of opened up, and I realized how much riding is available to us here. And I love the sport. I love the skill involved. I'm not by nature a super fast rider. I still have a bit of a governor because I just don't like falling at my age.
Right.
And but I really enjoy the trials riding skill of that. And I don't know why. It's intriguing to me. And maybe because I was a BMX kid when I was really young, I played a lot of my BMX and raced BMX, but I was more into the tricks and bunny hopping and wheelie stands and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe, I'm regressing back to my youth again and having a bit of fun on dirt bikes doing that. And so anyway, once I found that sport, it just took over. It just checked so many boxes for me as an athlete, things that I was looking for without realizing. But I had tried a lot of other sports. I cycled, I mountain bike, I trail run, I did an Ironman, I even climbed some mountains, and just looking for some sort of stoke or some sort of adventure or challenge. And enduro riding sort of checked everything for me. There's still some great camaraderie with your buddies, and you're hanging out at the end of a trail run and having a beer by the truck. And and I love the way enduro bikes take you places that you would never, ever go, unless you were just doing some severe backcountry camping. You would never get back in to see beaver dams and bridges and, things like that. Was the adventure of it was what really turned me on to that sport. And I haven't looked back.
Mm. Yeah, clearly. Well, it's funny, you said earlier that you weren't sure what attracted you, and actually that's kind of what we're going to pick at here, because I think there's probably some universal truths there, but there's also some things I think are pretty specific to you. I wondered, for example, whether the sheer physical, athleticism of it played some role. So it seems to me, riding through the woods, I get. But hard enduro can be a good deal more than that, it seems to me. I was looking, for example, at the criteria for your race class at Romaniacs, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. We don't need to go there right now. But it described, so each of these descriptions was designed to help people figure out which class they should race in, I guess. And here's what yours said. It said, you should have trained hard to achieve peak physical fitness, mental stability, the ability to deal with pain and endurance. You should be able to quickly recover a fluent riding style after dragging your bike through sections that you have never considered riding before. So that's a little more than riding through the woods. You don't see that kind of warning for a track day, right? So I wonder whether that brute power piece is part of what makes you feel at home there.
Yeah, there's no question. I'm a bit of a sadist when it comes to fitness and physical challenges. I do like that, which is why I've done some longer endurance sports like Ironman and did in triathlon, like things like that.
Right.
I love the feeling when it's over. And that sounds funny because I do like the journey and the preparation and all that stuff too, but the accomplishment that you feel and the reward that you feel when you've gone above and beyond what you could expect is that's what I really look for and try to get to. And so I do kind of set goals for myself just to kind of keep me on track and keep me training hard. And I love having challenges out there. Romaniacs was a different different thing altogether, because it isn't something that I could cheat my way through with just good fitness
Right.
and good strength. I needed a lot of skill, and even, during leading up and even during the race, was a bit my biggest concern was, can my body handle this, and do I have the skill to actually achieve this? And that was kind of an uncomfortable situation for me, because I've never really felt that way before. I'm normally pretty prepared, and I'm normally, I expect that my fitness, or the, dedication I put into fitness and strength or whatever, usually that can get me through a lot of things. And, we had a saying in hockey that, you can outwork skill any day of the week. And so I developed that as a player. I always felt like I had an edge on guys because I was more fit than them. And there is a lot of truth to that. And even at the highest level in the NHL, man, you can outwork a lot of really, really good hockey players. And, the best players, they do it all. They work hard, but they also have an extreme amount of skill as well. They got Sidney Crosby's of the world. But,
Right.
I developed that kind of attitude where I'll just going to work my ass off and I'll figure it out. So I'm definitely attracted to that. I definitely like putting myself out there at the risk of failure is what I kind of tell people. That's an uncomfortable place to be. But it sure makes you feel alive when you're doing it.
Right. Interesting. That rings true. It's funny. This week, my wife is out of town, so the cat and I are rewatching Long Way Around. And your comment about being glad it's over kind of rang true to me. There's another aspect of this athleticism I'm kind of curious about, and I'm way out of my depth here because I spent my primary school years skating on my ankles, so I don't have any firsthand knowledge of what it's actually like to play in a hockey game. But there's a particular focus involved in riding in dirt, especially fast. So you're taking stuff in that's way closer and happening way faster. Where riding on the road is more of a big picture kind of orientation. At least that's how it seems to me. And two things strike me about that. One is that it sounds deeply, kind of meditative in the sense that you can't have anything else in your head. But the other is it's sort of like I imagine it would be playing a game like hockey, where you've got this prescribed arena of play and a hyper focus on a specific objective that might just be 10 feet away. Am I being overly romantic here, or do you think there's a parallel?
No, I think you're spot on, Bruce. And in fact, very good observation. Hockey is that. We have a lot shorter shifts, meaning my time on the ice is usually 45 seconds or less, and maybe a minute or less, and then you get usually 2-3 minutes of rest, and then you go back again. And so, but you're spot on in that you're everybody's trying to get into that flow state, that elusive flow state where everything's quiet around you, and you just it's like an out of body experience. And when you can get into that as an athlete, it's fantastic. It's elusive. It's hard to get there. But you're right about decision making on the ice is all split second. In fact, you're making your choices before the puck is even on your stick most of the time. It's very, very quick. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of visual reading of the play. You're scanning the ice, and players are crisscrossing in front of you. So there's definitely a lot of similarities to riding in the woods, where you're problem solving. I think I took Chris Birch's course a few years ago,
right.
And I think he used that analogy where you're problem solving things that are happening ahead of you, and the faster you can problem solve, the faster you can ride through the woods. And, and I think that is spot on. And, you're assessing the terrain ahead of you, obviously, and making choices, line choices, and speed and braking choices. All that stuff is happening so fast. And, I certainly see similarities in the way we had to kind of mentally focus for hockey. And that is maybe what I really enjoy about it, is it does take you out of your day-to-day life for the time that you're on the bike.
Yeah.
There isn't any time to think of anything else, especially when you're new like me, or newish like me. I was taking so much on so fast that I had no room for error and no room to think about anything else, and absolutely loved it. Absolutely love it.
I read an interview in which you said that you were a great believer in the beginner's mind, which is a sort of a Buddhist concept that's come up with other writers on this show, including a Buddhist monk, which is fun. Who rode?
He would know.
He would know, and he rode motorcycles in L.A., so he would know times two. But it got me thinking about what it must be like to transition out of a career like the one you had in professional hockey. And maybe you've just kind of answered this, but I was curious to know whether finding this kind of riding helped with that transition, if it was, part of the, I don't want to say healing, but it seems to me you'd leave something behind, and did this fill that space?
It didn't, it's hard to replace. It's hard to replace playing your sport, which hockey is my sport, at the highest level you can play it. And I was very fortunate to have played for a long time in an 18-year career. And I think some of the issue with retired players is they're chasing that feeling, and you'll never ever replace it. There's a lot of there's adrenaline, obviously. There's the fans when you're skating onto the ice in front of a home crowd for a big playoff game or whatever. Like, that stuff's all well and good, amazing. The travel, like the whole lifestyle thing, is amazing. But at the end of the day, what I miss the most, and still miss, is I miss just sitting around the locker room after a game, knowing that I did everything I possibly could that night, win or lose. It was like the best I could ever play. And my teammates, we could all look each other in the eye, and we knew, like, that's the best we could do, boys. And that feeling is amazing. And so that's really what, when I draw the parallel to motorcycling, especially dirt riding, there's many things like where you hit a corner well. You know what I mean? Like, just there's certain sections where you just ride it really well. Or, a rock, there's a big rock wall you have to go up, and you ride it clean, and you're just like, man, that was exactly what I wanted to do. That felt amazing. And so, some of those are the little bit of bright spots as you're riding. It's not all like that. Sometimes you're crashing into trees, but there's highlight reel moments out there on a dirt bike too, and that's what I kind of cling to. Yeah, that's what I try to do more and more of, I guess.
Yeah, and I would have to think that the dirt riding can be, if you pick the right place to do it, it can be sort of packed with those moments. Whereas on the road, it does become a bit road after a while, unless you force yourself to find new challenges. You mentioned the locker room a minute ago, and earlier on you talked about the camaraderie. I watched a film back in the winter called Banch. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a documentary about privateer motocross racing in New England.
Okay.
I'll send you a link if you're interested. It was
for sure.
Really, like, it was a great watch. Considering that I don't ride in the dirt, I didn't think I'd identify with it as much as I felt like I actually did. And one of the big things that I envied about those guys in the film was the sense of community. Not just within the team and the friends that, kind of came to support the riders, but among the riders. And so I wondered if that sense of community was also part of your experience in the enduro world. It sounds like maybe it was. And what do you think that's all about?
Yeah, there's no question it is. It is a fantastic community. And I think, I lived that as a young baby, kind of at the dirt bike track every weekend.
Right.
And we were camping out with families, and, as my older brothers are racing. And so for me, I just, kind of forgot about that world for, you know, 40 years, 30 years. And then when I got back into it, and the first race that I went to compete in, it all came back to me. I was like, oh yeah, man, like all these people are camping and they're in vans and tents and trailers and, hanging out at rider meetings and, walking around campgrounds, chatting with each other. And I think it's an amazing community that's very supportive. Your bike breaks down, there's 8 guys there ready to wrench on it and troubleshoot with you. And,
Right.
And again, I had that as a kid, or at least I witnessed it all as a kid. And I think it just brought it all back for me when I kind of jumped in as an adult.
It's funny. Probably this isn't worth dwelling on, but I just wonder what it is about, playing in the woods that brings that out in people. Because I do think it's special. When I was younger, I mountain biked a bit, and I remember embarrassing myself in a race once, and failing to jump the bike and tacoing the front wheel. And there was a crowd. It was one of those 24-hour things at Hardwood Hills. You probably remember.
Yeah.
Those. And then through the crowd, holding a wheel over his head comes a complete stranger to offer me his wheel so I can continue riding. And I never forgot that. And it was so typical of that vibe. And it sounds like the dirt motorcycle racing world is similar. And, it's not that you don't see kindness like that in other riding communities, but it does seem a bit special. You don't have to comment on that, but I just thought it was worth shouting out.
No, it is. And you're right. And it's, you don't see that in hockey. And I love hockey. It's my sport. My son played, and I still love it. I still watch it, but it's, there's something that just got way too competitive, especially in youth hockey. And you just don't see that, right? Like you're at the arenas and you're playing your game, and then you're back in mom and dad's car and you're going home. Like the beauty of what we do is we are very remote, RVing or whatever. And so usually you spend your time sitting around a campfire, and that, to me, that social aspect is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And I really like, like I said earlier, you're going away to places that you would never, ever go to if you weren't on an enduro bike or an ATV potentially, or something like that. But, kind of, we're all in it together type of a vibe is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well put. We're all in it together. I like that. It seems like one of the places a dirt bike can take you is Romania. So why don't we talk about Red Bull Romaniacs for a minute, because that's going to be fresh in your mind, I would think.
Sure.
You first came up in a conversation with our mutual friend, Todd Topper at Mission Cycle, while you were in Romania competing. And I didn't really know a lot about the event before then, but I went home and looked it up. And I watched the highlight reel, and I have to say, it looks like 4 days of masochistic insanity. Can you tell us? So let's assume people listening might not all be familiar with it either. Can you tell us a bit about Romaniacs?
Sure. It's Red Bull Romaniacs is it's obviously in Romania, a small town called Sibiu, and it's part of the World Enduro Hard Enduro Series. It was called the WES. I think it's an FIM sanctioned series now. It's a pro tour, right, essentially for hard enduro. And Romania is one of the hardest. It's long. It's a time trial stage followed by 4 big hard enduro stages out in the woods. And so I think it's been around a long time. It's one of the originals and very well organized. And it is a beatdown. It's a bit of a marathon in a sense that you need to be conditioned for anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day, and of hard riding, and over the course of those 4 days. So, food, nutrition, rest, sleep, all that stuff, mechanical wise, you have to keep your bike sharp, keep you healthy and safe. And so it's a bit of a marathon, and, you can't get too carried away with the highlight, you got to keep in mind those highlight videos are usually of the gold class riders,
Right.
which is all the pro, is the hardest trails you can imagine, whether it's their POV cameras or Red Bull actually putting those videos together. And then also keep in mind that most of the videos are taken from a place where pedestrians could walk to.
Hmm.
So they're going to walk from a road, they're going to walk up some hill climb or whatever and start filming for the day. And so you only get snippets of what the whole day is all about. But no question, it is the hardest thing I've ever done. There are five: there's gold, silver, bronze, iron, and atom class. And so you can sort of pick your poison. We picked bronze class because I had some friends that have ridden it, and not like they're better riders than me, but I was like, I think that's kind of where I belong. It gives me something to really work towards.
Hmm.
And that's how we came about choosing our bronze class. But you could do iron, you could do atom. Those guys are still having a great time. But each course is separate. There's a bit of shared route, but for the most part, it suits your category pretty well.
Right.
And like gold class it's out of this world what those guys are doing. I can't believe they ride some of the things they're riding up and down. It's absolutely ridiculous. But that's the stuff I just like to watch and don't prefer to try it on my own.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you about the race class that you chose, and I think what it tells us is that the level of competition at the top is just absurd. Because when I first looked at the results, I was like, oh, what's he doing in bronze? Like, is he sandbagging here, or what's going on? And I'm flipping through the results, and I see that Paul Therese is in the same class as you, and it's right. And I'm like, okay,
yeah, but he rode it on the Tenere, the T7. What is that, a 750 or 700?
right.
Adventure bike. So, I mean, just absolutely ridiculous that he rode that with that bike, but just, testament to what his skill is.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I I have no thoughts of progressing up in those categories. It is, that's a young man's game. Even in our bronze class, like, I just turned 50 in January, and I was with two guys that were older than me, two buddies from our area. And, we're definitely the graybeards in our bronze class group, but there's a lot of young kids, 25 to 35, that are all kind of maybe progressing in the sport still on the upwards trajectory. And, we're hanging on and just trying to test our limits, and we certainly got that in Romania.
Yeah, I got that impression. I guess they prepare a little short highlight reel for each of the competitors, and so obviously I watched yours, and I take your point that not every minute of the race was like this, but I'm thinking 4 days, and that scene on this. So you do that wooden wall of death thing, and then you end up on a stairway. And I'm like, what? Like, what did they have you doing? What? Give us a flavor of the course.
Yeah, the only thing I can say is it's relentless. We do anywhere from like 120 to 150 kilometers a day, and it is full on all day, every day. There's very little flat terrain. You're either going uphill, downhill, or really steep side hilling, which is, I think, even more dangerous than going up and down. And so you're constantly on. If you do watch Romaniac's videos, they show these great big open fields, pasture fields that are up on the high ridges, and it looks beautiful from like helicopter cameras. But truth be told, when you're riding on that, it's an absolute nightmare. It's rough. You're constantly chattering. There's great big washout potholes that you have to avoid. There's no mental break the entire day, right up to the finish line. Like, I can't remember which stage it was, day 2 maybe. we had to cross a river, like, I want to say 500 feet from the finish line. And there, when I got to it, there was 3 bikes there all watered out. And I was like, are you kidding me? I've been riding for 7.5 hours. And you're going to make me do this right before the finish line? But that is what Romaniacs is. They, that little finish line in town that you're talking about, I've never ridden on that. Like, where do you practice something like that?
Yeah, right.
It was a great big wall berm that would be more suitable for like a downhill mountain bike park or something.
Right.
And and there's fans all lined up in the river. And I stopped like 50 feet from that. I literally stopped my bike and looked at it, and I was like, holy shit, are you kidding me? Because we didn't know that was coming.
Right.
And then I'm like, all right, Scott, one thing I don't want to do is slide down into the river. So just keep some speed and be steady. And it turned out to be not very difficult to ride, but it does get in your head.
Yeah.
There's no question. But that stuff I really enjoy. I like that kind of riding. And the stuff that we couldn't prepare for was the really, really steep downhill. The descents were horrible, long, very hard on the body. You're in basically a half of a squat the entire time. And it's so steep, your upper body, like your hands and forearm, shoulders are all getting pretty taxed. And, at times you can't ride down. We're bulldogging, we call it, which is standing beside your bike, walking.
Mm.
And it's really slow and really tough. And that really took us off guard. And some of those downhills go on for 30 to 40 minutes.
Wow.
Super, super steep and technical, and rocks and trees, and no way we can practice that here.
Right.
Like maybe get a bit of it out in Calgary or, out in BC, but man, that was for all 3 of us, myself and my 2 buddies, like that was the one thing that our takeaway was, the descents were just incredibly difficult and taxing mentally too. Yeah. Really hard.
Yeah, I can't imagine. And I mean, there's nothing you can do on a bike that commits you more than a descent. Like there's no bailout.
No, at least I don't know how to, unless you slide and hit a tree. Yeah. Maybe that's what I see the pros do it, and they literally do that. Like they'll fishtail, skid, and slam their back tire against a tree, and that checks some of their speed. And that's just next level skill that I don't have.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a lot of butt clenching moments in those woods.
I can't imagine. You mentioned your comment a second ago about these guys sort of slamming their back tires into trees to lose speed. It makes me think of another impression I've got from this kind of riding, which is that there's an intimacy between the bike and the rider that might be different and maybe deeper than maybe any other kind of motorcycling. I mean, I get that feeling that according to the rules, you're out there on your own with the bike anyway, so it's kind of up to you to fish it out of the water or a sand pit or whatever. But also, the bikes take incredible punishment, which I have to believe is counterbalanced by a lot of mechanical sympathy on the part of the rider, and somehow, I don't know, they seem like horses to me. Is this making sense?
No, it does. You're right. But the bikes they do take a lot of abuse. So you can drop these things, which we often do, slide them down a rock cliff, and usually you can just pick them up and start riding. But we carry tools, of course, and you do have breakdowns and some stuff happens. Usually it's repairable. If it's not, then your race day is done pretty much.
Right.
And then keep in mind, like the better rider you are, the less you fall. And so, part of my desire to practice as much as I do is just that, as a 50-year-old man with, I've had 16 surgeries in my playing career, I just don't want to fall.
Right.
And it's sometimes unavoidable, but if I can gain a lot more skill, then my riding career, I can still have fun like, Lawrence Hacking does at whatever, mid 60s. He's still out there ripping in the woods, and that's what I would like to do. So the gold class guys are way more gentle on their motorcycles than bronze or iron or atom guys. And our bikes seem to be just getting abused and repaired every night and patched together and get ready to ride another day tomorrow.
Right. You're right, which is more like the kids at Hully Gully than, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you about injuries. I mean, I think that just comes with it. Like, I seem to recall towards the end of your hockey career, you had a wrist injury that was kind of stubborn. And I wonder if you've, I assume you have a collection of scars like that you feel like you have to be careful with, which given the sport is remarkable.
Yeah, it is. I do, by the way. Like the biggest problem for me now is my shoulders. I've had 9 shoulder operations, 4 on one and 5 on the other. And I don't have any cartilage left in either shoulder. So that's my biggest thing. And I do, depending on the terrain we're riding, I get if there's a lot of sharp edge rocks that I'm kind of crashing into at the front end, I have instant feedback into my shoulders. But what it does, it encourages me to ride better because, if you're keeping your front end light and, you're rock hopping and log hopping correctly, there's a lot less force kind of going into your upper body. And so it's encouraged me to kind of, do things the right way. And when I don't, I have instant feedback. And so that, I don't say that's, I wish I was healthier, but you know what, I see the way the pros ride and I see that they use the clutch and throttle for everything they do rather than manhandling their bike. And that's what I aspire to try to get better at, just to maintain a riding career for a little bit longer if I can.
Yeah. One thing that struck me watching these videos that I thought was kind of cool about the sport, and maybe this is true of a lot of dirt-focused competitions, so things like motocross and so forth, is how close and how involved the audience is. It seems like the interactions with the people watching the races can be really up close and personal. Occasionally you'll see audience members help people with their bikes and stuff like that. Was that your experience? And after having a career of an audience behind glass, what is that like?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, the fans are, again, remember what I said about them being close to the road or parking lots or whatever, they'll walk up. So there's definitely like a few spots throughout the course that are like that. But generally by the time I got to that spot, they've all gone home.
Okay.
They're out there to help Graham Jarvis and Johnny Walker and Billy Bolt, like the best guys. They're out there to help those guys to say, hey, I helped Graham Jarvis up this hill. There's nobody out there bragging about helping Scott Thornton up a hill. So by the time we get there, we're pretty much on our own.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you're kind of left trying to figure it out. And, for us, in the category we were in, especially with our speed being kind of closer to the back of our pile, I'd go 2-3 hours sometimes without seeing a rider.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it's not, like I said, those highlight reels they come in a couple moments here and there at every stage.
Right.
Usually around the finish line. But throughout the day, if you're riding for 8 hours, there's definitely blocks of time where you're just kind of on your own, ripping up a riverbed or something. And, just the minutes go by and you're like, man, I haven't seen anybody for like 2 hours out here. So you're definitely left to fend for yourself. Keep in mind, they do a prologue, which is a bit of an enduro cross track right in downtown Sibiu, where there's like 10,000 spectators, like basically right on a fence line watching you. We didn't get to do that because of COVID criteria.
Right.
So that would definitely change things, where that would feel more like hockey, where I have 10,000 people watching me, in a tight little intimate area. Only I feel a lot more confident with a stick and a puck than I do
Right.
with a motorcycle.
Right. Was that when you had those moments that you're out there by yourself? Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Did you miss the energy of people around you?
No, I didn't mind it at all. I'm you kind of get into what you're doing. The one good thing about that is you're not chasing somebody else's pace. You're riding your own bike, you're riding your own pace, and you're trying to be safe. And you have time to, stop and look at a hill or a line and, ride up it. So I don't mind little bits of that. Overall, I'd much prefer to be riding with my buddies.
Right.
And, and in fact, the last stage, the three of us guys that went over from here, we agreed the night before that we're just going to ride together. And so the next day we all took off and we all connected, about a half an hour in, because we had different start times.
Right.
And once we connected, we rode the 7 or 8 hours together all day long. And as it turned out, that there was 2 or 3 spots on that stage that we really needed each other, like literally had to pull each other up like a greasy riverbank. And I hadn't seen that the 3 prior days, where I kind of got through everything on my own. That day I would have been screwed without those guys. It would have been a long battle in the woods by myself. So I was glad to have them around, and a nice way to cross the finish line with a couple teammates, and we get to congratulate each other and share a beer at the finish line. It was a lot more fun.
Right. Because you said your goal was to finish and stay healthy, and that's very much in the spirit of Red Bull Romaniacs. I mean, going through the website, they are at great pains to tell you that just showing up and crossing the finish line is kind of the whole ballgame. So that it must have been amazing to do that with friends. So you would say, by that standard, mission accomplished in Romania.
No question. I got exactly what I wanted out of it. I tested myself at so many different levels, physically exhausted at times, which is, like I said before, usually my fitness is always my best asset. And there's definitely times where I was like physically drained, mainly due to the heat. It was high 30s, very humid, much like Ontario summer. Yeah. And we ran out of water twice for like a couple of hours, and I was super drained. And so physically really challenging, mentally just having to stay that sharp and that focused for, that many days in a row was super challenging. And then skill wise, I was out of my element. Like it was above and beyond what I expected. And I didn't go in underestimating it, but it was way more difficult than I thought it would be. And I had to actually get better just to finish over there, meaning that I did things that I've never done before on a bike. And so, at the end of the day, I'm super stoked that I got everything I wanted out of it. And I did finish, which was my goal. And, I don't have any aspiration of actually racing that event. It's about surviving that event. So, I got what I wanted and super happy and pumped, and not sure if I'll ever go back. You never know, but I might go back to riding asphalt on a Harley again. It's a little easier on my body.
Well, that was going to be my next question is, how long was it before you were ready for more? But it sounds like you're not quite yet.
Yeah, that was an interesting conversation I've had with a bunch of different people, as they would joke about it and say, did you sell your bike when you got home and things like that? And I actually came home really motivated, which I'm happy too. Like I kind of expected to come home and just put my bike away for a month. And I didn't. I couldn't wait to come home and practice what I learned over there, start practicing things that I couldn't do over there. And so, yeah, it affected me in the right way. I came home positive. I was pretty healthy. I had a little bit of a lower back tweak on the last day. I think it's just trying to lift my bike up the wrong way and had a bit of a tweak. But other than that, I was pretty healthy. I didn't really have any big offs or crashes. And, so I came home feeling good, feeling motivated to get on the bike and ride, and still am. I'm still excited to get out there when I can, and look forward to the next challenge, whatever that might be.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that impression. I was gonna ask you. So I kind of created this question, and I was super nervous about asking it because it's rude. But I'm a little less nervous now because I think you've started to answer it. So here's the question, and fortunately we're on the phone, so.
Yeah.
But here goes. You've competed in these kind of insane events, and I have to imagine the effort to prepare is massive, and I have to imagine that it's expensive, even with sponsors. And I have to imagine there's a ton of suffering and superhuman, kind of effort and probably lots of risks. But you're not winning. And, if you look at some of these hard enduro events, I wouldn't say you're close to a podium even. So stay with me here. You seem like a guy who likes to win. And so I want to ask you this question because I think it will matter to the people listening to this. You seem like a guy who likes to win. You don't at this, other than by some standard you set for yourself. What keeps you going?
Well, I think you're kind of missing the point. I win. There's so many ways that I win by doing stuff like this. And it means the podium is irrelevant to me. Where I win is in the long journey to prepare for that, the skill and time that I have to invest in learning and getting better, the physical fitness that I have to do to prepare for an event. All of that's winning. I stay healthier. I stay mentally sharp, mentally focused. And then to go into the race and, as I said, challenge myself physically, mentally, skill wise, all of those things are what people don't do sitting on their couch watching TV.
Right.
And so every time I kick a bike over or get on it, I'm winning. And, like I said, I'm not a kid anymore. So the longer I can do this, that's how I measure success now. I don't measure it by podiums. And don't forget, what I said earlier about hockey, you don't win every night and by any stretch of the imagination. And I played 18 seasons and never won a Stanley Cup, which still hurts to this day, but it doesn't negate what I did for 18 years. There's so many positive things that can come from sport other than just the score clock or the podium finish. So, that's what I chase. That's what I get out of it. I get strong physical fitness. I get great camaraderie. I have great self-satisfaction at the end of an event that is supposed to kick my ass. And so I think I'm winning all the time.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that was what you were going to say, and I was pretty sure that it was, because I think the thing that struck me about doing my homework with Red Bull Romaniacs in particular, and in this sport in general, is that it's the sort of the thing you mentioned when you were talking about hockey. This idea that if you have someone who's both talented and willing to do the work, they're going to be unbeatable, and the rest of us just have to, kind of do our best, and that ought to be enough. And it's funny, I've heard this from other high performers and other kind of heroes in the sport. So you're not alone, and I think that's canonical for any kind of athlete, certainly motorcyclists. Did you want, just before we leave that event behind, did you want to give any love to to your sponsors? I saw in your profile that Mission was involved and KTM Canada was involved, but I have to think that everybody dug pretty deep to make this happen. Did you have?
Yeah, no question. Yeah, no question. First, let me just kind of finish one thought on that too. And I think the pros that are racing in Romania is much different than the intermediate recreational riders like us, right? So, I know I had a bunch of times with Tristan Hart, who's top Canadian rider, finished top 10 over there at his first time. We had a chance to hang out with him. He's there to win. Anything short of a podium is a disappointment to him. That's a different mindset. That is the way I was as a hockey player.
Right.
But as everybody else outside the top 15, maybe over there, are just there to challenge themselves and do as good as they can do. And at the end of the day, if I was to win the bronze class, what does that really mean? Like I'm not sure. There's still two different categories above me that are better than me.
Right.
So it's like, like you're the best third runner up or something like it. So we look for other ways to kind of get that satisfaction. But anyway, just on that note, I just want to finish with that. Regarding like sponsorship. Yeah. I mean, I had great support from Todd at Mission Cycle, the whole team in there actually. And Todd, he did, they're always great to me, but they kind of went above and beyond. And we got some suspension from Race Tech, which I've never done, custom suspension job like that. And Todd rushed that order and got them ready for me. And then I brought my suspension over to Romania with me, which makes a big difference when you're somebody my size. I'm way bigger than what stock suspension offers.
Right.
So that was amazing. I had some good coaches, like guys that, have been good mentors to me. And Lawrence Hacking is a good friend and rides a lot with me, a Canadian legend. And he's been inadvertently been coaching, meaning I just sit and listen to everything he says and I'm constantly learning. So he's been great for me. Lee Martin is another local race organizer, runs an event company called Rally Connects. And Lee has been helpful and brought us out for some training runs. And then out west, we've done 2 trips out to Calgary and rode with Shane Cuthbertson. And Shane has a company called Rad 2.0. And Shane is multiple Red Bull Romaniacs finisher in the top 10 of gold class. So he is, arguably the top enduro rider in Canada for many, many years.
Jeez. And
runs, some training camps. He was the organizer of the Red Bull Outliers, which I met, when I first went out to that event. And Shane knew that I aspired to do Romaniac, so said, hey, why don't you come on out and we'll do a 5 or 6 day training camp. And so I've done 2 of those with Shane and out in Calgary area. And I wouldn't have made it without him and the time that we rode in Calgary. I definitely wouldn't. I was leaning on everything that he ever taught me at times and just going, okay, what would Shane do right now? What would he do to get up this hill? Or, when you're sitting on a hill for an hour trying to find ways up of it, you start to reflect on everything everybody has ever told you. Right. And the stuff that Shane taught us was invaluable to us. But yeah, I mean, that was about it. We have a friend or relationship with a guy from Smith Optics. So we had all of our goggles provided with Smith goggles, which was fantastic. Another buddy, I got some Lead helmets and gloves from my buddy, and boots from buddy at MXB Magazine. And, the Callus Photo guys, with 2 motocross guys from out in the East Coast of Canada. Right. That have now started a company called Callus. And so they sent me a couple of race kits, and yeah, it was good. And multiple people, that not really sponsors, but I had a ton of people reach out through social media offering help, that guys I don't know. They just either said, hey, here's my cell number, give me a call. I've done it twice. Or, I've raced in Europe for many years. Give me a shout if you have any questions. And, for those people, I felt like I had this massive team behind me. And And it was a really good feeling kind of going over there knowing that, hey, there's a lot of people invested in this outside of just my wife and kids.
Right.
And, and at times felt the weight of that, but that's the stuff I loved. So yeah, anyway, long answer there, but I think it's important to mention that it was a bit of a team effort for sure. And a lot more people than just me that were behind the effort, and I appreciated all the help I got from everyone.
Yeah. I don't think that was a long answer at all. I think that sort of speaks to the community thing we talked about earlier. I think that's kind of awesome. And I agree with what you said about Todd and his team. As much as I know those guys, I think they were there for the passion more than, any commercial gain that might have eventually come their way. And he is a suspension genius.
Totally. Yeah.
So banking off that, you did something a couple of weeks ago that I think is kind of amazing, and it was, I guess, sort of private, but I think it deserves some profile maybe, but I also think it could tell us a little more about the spirit of the sport. I think you called it throttle therapy, and it was an event you hosted at your home late last summer. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I guess expanding on, all the positive things that I've gotten out of this sport. I have a couple hockey friends that do ride, and I've kind of felt the same way. And then I have a couple military friends from up in the Ottawa Valley, and just getting into riding, kind of talking about the same thing. And it's like, I feel that hockey and military guys, when they retire from their service or retire from playing days, we're still young. We're trying to figure out what's next. We're all trying to replace the void from competitive sport. And I think riding motorcycles checks so many boxes for me that I wanted to share that with others. So we come up with this idea to do an event up here, and throttle therapy is it's by no means is that an original name. A lot of guys talk about that. A lot of guys refer to street riding, motocross, like you name it. You kick your leg over a motorcycle and it's throttle therapy.
Yep.
But I thought it was super, super fitting for what I was trying to do. And basically what I'd like to offer is a place where there's a really low barrier of entry, meaning guys that don't have motorcycles or riding gear or anything. They don't know where to go, where to start. I wanted to bring them here, mainly hockey and military guys, but I did open it up to a couple other friends. And they can come here. Bikes were provided by KTM Canada. I had their whole demo fleet of motorcycles here, which was incredible. And they also sent a bunch of riding gear for these guys. Then all my friends brought helmets and boots and whatever. And then I had coaches out there, world-class coaches. I mean, I can't, it was like, the all-star team of coaches. And, we had Lawrence Hacking coach one of the groups, and my friend Lance Webb actually was like his assistant. And Lance was the guy that went to Romania with me. So they ran one group, and I had Todd Topper from Mission, and he brought Ken Bland, who's another kind of legendary motocross coach in our region. And then I had Lee Martin from Rally Connects, who does all kinds of riding schools. And then Chris Pomeroy, who is a retired pro motocross guy, still racing in his 40s. And Pomeroy came up as well. And so we had 3 different groups, 6 or 8 riders in each group. Basics, right? Guys that have never actually pulled a clutch in to somebody that's been riding in the woods for a while. And we had a great day of riding, had a barbecue, and just kind of hung out at the end of the day. And it was fantastic. The guys that don't ride were introduced to the sport in a really friendly way that it didn't scare them. And, what I didn't want, here's what normally happens. You get on a motorcycle with a bunch of buddies, and you go into the woods, and you try to keep up to them, and you start crashing into trees, you get hurt, and then you never ride again.
You're right.
And I was like, we can't do that to these guys. This needs to start real slow in an open field. And the coaches did an amazing job of bringing them along. And by the end of the day, they were riding into my woods track, which is my woods loop, is single track, and it's very rocky and challenging. And a bunch of the guys went into there, like first time on bikes, and went into there. So, I thought it was a great day. I'd like to make it an annual thing. That at the end of the day, I'd love to get, guys that were suffering with some traumatic brain injuries or PTSD, because there is some healing going on when you're on a motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
Neurological patterning is happening. Your focus and attention, and you kind of leave your day behind. I think there's some real healing to be done, and I just want to introduce that to more people if I can.
I'm wondering, I mean, you've got a lot of irons in the fire, and I could see this becoming very big indeed. I wonder what made you take it on?
Well, other than the fact that it's what we do as hockey guys, we always look after each other. And, in retirement, we're kind of cast off on our own. And the Alumni Association does a pretty good job. But I've met a lot of guys that are just kind of searching, right? And I was really fortunate. The area that I moved into, the friend group that I found, the adventures and the sports that I participate in, have all helped me heal and transition into retirement really well. And a lot of guys just don't have that. So, outside of me just kind of caring about those guys and wanting to kind of give them the opportunity to kind of see something, understand that life's not over when you retire. Like there's still lots of life left, lots of things to do. In the end, that's all I'm trying to do is just share that and give guys something else other than sitting on a bar stool or sitting on a couch all the time.
Right. That purpose thing. I hear a lot from people who have found, healing on motorcycles of one kind or another. Listeners, but occasionally guests. And I wonder if the focus thing that we talked about earlier has something to do with it. The ability of a motorcycle to put you completely in the present moment. That and, having a purpose for training and a way to test yourself and a supportive community. But really that a place to put your sense of alertness. I recall one guest I had on this podcast who was recovering from PTSD, and she was a soldier. And that was very much her story in terms of what riding did to sort of keep her keel in the water. Does that sound true to you? And is it as true of a retired professional athlete as it might be of a soldier or a first responder?
100%. And there's another retired military guy down the stateside called Doc Cotton. And there's a really good YouTube video. I think it's called Motorcycle Missions, and it has an interview with Doc Cotton. And I came across that one day as well. And that was a big motivator for me. If you haven't seen his story, you should. Almost 30 years in service. He was a medic, obviously why his name's Doc. And, just suffered a lot in retiring and found motorcycles with some buddies and was even suicidal at one point. And motorcycles kind of saved his life. And it's a great story, and it motivated me, and then, I also watched another film, and there's a surf community out in California, and some of these surfers started bringing out retired military, medical leave, military soldiers. And I'm talking people that have, had both legs taken off or they're amputees. They're really suffering. And they get them out on surfboards. And I remember watching this small documentary and the one military guy the other day, they were walking up the beach and said to the instructor, I wonder what the waves are going to be like tomorrow.
Mm.
And the guy, the founder of it, when he was interviewed, said, I know one thing is if they're asking me what the waves are going to be like tomorrow, they're not going to take their life today.
Right.
And it gave me goosebumps, and I was like, man, that's powerful. And so, in some small way, those are things that kind of motivated me to say, hey, let's get that going in our world. Let's get hockey guys out on dirt bikes. It's things that I know. Not everybody likes golf when they retire, right? There's other things to do. And we just got to introduce them to it, and hopefully they like it as much as I do.
So I wonder whether this plays a role too. And this may have come up in the interview I mentioned earlier, but I'm not positive, so I won't attribute it with any certainty. But someone has said to me that one of the ways in which riding dirt bikes in particular is healing is that it takes you back to who you were before. So that I think that's especially true if you rode bikes as a kid. But, even the kind of playfulness, you used the word regression earlier in this conversation, it almost turns the clock back. And I heard you when you said, you didn't want to push these guys too hard, at the beginning, and didn't want to give them, didn't want to hand them a failure. And it all felt a bit to me like that, to use the current vernacular, a sort of safe space. I wonder if you think that that kids at play thing is also part of what's healing.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, look at how muddy we get, like you're in the woods, you're waist deep in a pile of mud somewhere, lifting a guy's bike out. I mean, like nobody does that. You know what I mean? Like we're all clean and shaven. We get in our leather seat cars, we drive in air conditioned vehicles. And it's, when we were kids, we were playing in mud pits and, rivers, catching frogs. We were out kind of with nature and doing our thing. And there's no question that this kind of brings us back. The playful camaraderie we have and joking with each other and, all that stuff is just like a bunch of kids on a playground. And it's refreshing. It's good to go back to that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's funny though. I think it seems to me you were also pretty clear about who you were dealing with. I saw the when your email address was shared with me, it was attached to the final instructions you'd given to the attendees that day, and one phrase kind of jumped out at me, which was "bring your A game," which I thought, okay, well, normally you would sort of expect a kind of nurturing tone, but you went at these guys as equals and as presumptive athletes, and which I thought was cool. Was that a conscious choice? And tell me about that.
They are athletes, right? And I think we come from a world of itineraries and schedules and drills and practice, and we thrive in that. If you don't like practice and structure, then you won't survive in the NHL. And I doubt, I'm speaking, from no experience, but I doubt you would survive in the military if you didn't embrace practice and structure.
Yeah.
And so I don't mind providing that in talking with our coaches and guys like Lawrence and stuff like that. And, we had some open discussion about how to lay out the day. And some of it was suggested maybe we just let them kind of ride. And I was kind of like, no, like, let's make this very structured. Like I can ride around that figure eight pylon course for 4 hours and not get bored, because I'm going to find something different about every time I did it. And I think most of the guys that I invited here were kind of built in the same cloth. And so I go, that's what they want. They haven't had any of this structure in their life since they retired. Like, let's give them a strict day. There's an itinerary. Breakfast is 9 a.m. sharp.
Right.
Don't be late. Coffee's 8:30 sharp. Don't be late. We gear up. We suit up. By 10 o'clock, bikes are started. Drills are started. Like, to me, that is my life. That's the way we were told to get on every bus. And, you're not 1 minute later, the bus leaves on you or the plane leaves, So I did want it to be like that with a purpose. because I think that's the way the guys like it.
Yeah. Smart. And I heard the day was incredible. I heard, in fact, that it got emotional at times. Did you experience that? And I think it's notable for presumably a bunch of tough humans. Did you see that emotion, and where did you think that came from?
I did, and some of it's private discussion with guys that I won't mention on the podcast, but certainly. It was impactful for some. And I think at the end of the day, mission accomplished. It's what we wanted to do, and credit to all the people that were there. The coaches made it flow so well and made it fun for those, participants. And, you could just see the smiles. Like, we'd take a break for water or whatever, and, there'd be 10 or 12 guys kind of sitting around having a drink of water and a muffin or snack or whatever, and loving it, just loving it. And it just, to me, it was like, it felt like a locker room. Like it was exactly like I felt for 18 years at the end of a practice or a game, and guys are kind of bullshitting, laughing, telling stories about what they just did on the ice. And for these guys, it was talking about looping out a bike or going over a log or whatever it was. And it was funny, and everyone's laughing, and just, it was all peers. And it was totally exactly how I wanted the day to play out. And it was great. I can't wait for the next one.
Well, so will there be a next one? Are you? I think you said you wanted to do this hopefully annually. Do you see it expanding to other geographies too, or is this more of a take it slow thing?
Yeah, I haven't decided. I truthfully didn't lay this out like I wanted to be an event guy. I just kind of wanted to be small and intimate, and and see what happens. And I think I think it's powerful to do that. I'm not financially driven with this. In other words, I don't want it to be like a paid attendance thing for guys.
Right.
I just want it to be as organic as it is. And, I just want to be amongst them. I don't want to be organizing and not participating. So, but I definitely think I would open it up to other people that are in it for the same reasons, like potentially firefighters. And well, actually we had a couple firefighters here, but any emergency services people or whatever that have kind of, I feel, the initial thing was sort of that you've suffered with TBIs at some point, traumatic brain injury, some sort of PTSD, or some sort of transition mental health issue, meaning some depression over maybe where you are in your life, or some suffer with some anxiety, or something like that was really my angle in support of mental health. And so I feel like anybody that's kind of dealt with some of that in their life, then I would gladly bring them along and let them participate.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and I completely understand why you wouldn't want to commercialize it. I wonder if you think, so speaking more generally, to people who haven't really tried dirt riding but aren't trying to overcome anything. I wonder if anybody's not trying to overcome anything right now, but
yeah.
I wonder if there's something about it that makes it powerful that way. If there's something about it that you just can't experience on the street or on a racetrack. What do you think we're missing if we never ride anything worse than a gravel road?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like for me, the whole physical mental challenge thing that we've talked about at length here is really what gets me. At the end of the day, I feel like I've ridden street bikes, mainly Harleys, for a long, long time. I've done a lot of like longer cross country tours on them, and also got into adventure riding in a 1190 KTM that I took up through Alaska and things like that. So I feel like there's some therapy in every bike you get on. I'm not one of those guys that doesn't like certain styles of riding. I think anybody that rides a bike is awesome. And, but with enduro in particular, I just think there's so much skill involved that it takes you to another level. You have to sort of practice your art and practice the skills to progress and be safer. And I think that's what kind of gets me. I really enjoy that practice progression, that sort of linear progression, I guess, of getting better at something, starting something I've never done before and just trying to improve. And that's what gets me personally. And I don't know if everybody's attracted to that kind of thing, but that's definitely my makeup.
Yeah. Well, I get that, and that's been your life. It's interesting. I read a piece of research recently about aging, and it said that, and I'm speaking here as someone who is older than you, that's the secret to staying young. It isn't actually just a question of doing things or being stimulated, but you actually have to apply yourself to something at which progress is measurable and possible, and that's how you'll stop the clock.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you maybe you just have some natural wisdom that way, but that rings perfectly true to me. I have to ask one bike geek question
Sure.
before we leave that day behind. I understand that KTM had their electric trail bikes there that day, and I just think that is an awesome application of that technology. Did you get a chance to ride one, and how was it?
Yeah, actually I didn't, and I meant to, but a bunch of my buddies kind of took it out. I think it's amazing. Right now, the challenge will be on battery life, much like it was for cars, I guess, maybe electric vehicles in the beginning.
Yeah.
We go out and we're off in backwoods country for 6 or 8 hour rides. And right now there's no battery that would last that long.
Right.
So for my style of application, it's not there yet. But definitely for like backyard motocross tracks, I think you get about 2 or 3 hours of battery life on it. So you can definitely do a track day at a motocross track with it all day long and probably have a blast.
Yeah.
Especially inner city stuff. If you had a bit of a backyard, you could probably play around in your backyard and your neighbors would never know you're out there.
Right.
So I think it's, I'd love to go rip mountain bike trails with it. And nobody would ever know I'm in the woods with them on the mountain bike trails. But no, unfortunately, I never had time that day to ride. I was kind of busy cooking dinner and kind of getting meals and stuff ready for the boys. But I think the boys loved it, and it is the way things are going. If we can figure out the length of battery your buddy, not your buddy, but you mentioned Long Way Around, like those guys, you and McGregor, they did the last one on the new Harley, right? The new electric bike.
That's right. Yeah.
And although they had many supporters and stumbling things happen around them with batteries freezing and whatnot, I mean, it just shows the capacity and is going to grow. And I think it's a world it's unavoidable. I think we're got to go in that direction. And all your 2-stroke motor lovers are going to be like, oh man, there's nothing like the smell of a 2-stroke motor in the morning and the sound of the 2 strokes. And, I do love that, but it's unavoidable. We're going to move in that direction for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I actually was in the group that thought Long Way Up was great. I mean, there was a lot of carping about range issues and how much support they needed. But to me, it was really the spirit of adventure that they just kind of said, let's see what happens, and that's kind of what it's about.
Well, even with the Rivian trucks too, like it was all a bit of an experiment. And, I enjoyed it too. And the reason being is that they didn't hide any of that stuff. Like they were totally transparent with the issues they were having. And so it's not like they just edited up that thing to make it look like you could go around the world on an electric bike. They just showed these are beta model bikes, and the Rivians were, I think, beta testing at this time.
Yep.
And this is the best we can do right now with these. And it is possible. Take a bit of an army to do it, but we got through it.
Yeah. Well,
so I agree. I like that movie too. I thought it was interesting.
In one of the interviews that I mentioned earlier, the one where you talked about the beginner's mind, I think you also said to the interviewer that you were still looking for the why in your life, and that you thought there was something big waiting out there for you. Since then, do you still feel that way, or do you think you might be looking at it in some sense?
Yeah, I might be there with this throttle therapy event. I mean, that might be what I was trying to do. And I don't know why I've sometimes come off as a bit philosophical maybe, but
you found the right podcast.
I don't always do it with intention, but that event was pretty special for me. And, that might be what I was looking for.
Yep. Well, it's a good one. It sounds to me like purpose. If that's what we're all after, then this might be where the road has been leading. But as you say, let's see and let's not force it to the point where it loses its magic. I think it's it's pretty awesome. I'm wondering if there's anything else next for you. I think I may have heard someone mention Dakar when your name came up. Is that just a rumor or?
Yeah, I don't know. It's, I did, you mentioned briefly the Rally du Maroc in Morocco that Lawrence Hacking brought me to. And, I fell in love with that sport too, in a strange, different way. Because I did say that I'm not a real speed guy. And I kind of went there expecting it just to be like wide open, flat roads. And I realized the whole navigation piece to rally racing was really what I enjoyed the most. So, again, it was a super fun challenge. Jumped into the deep end with Lawrence, didn't know how to work our computers, navigating anything. Showed up in the starting line to day one for that, just absolutely terrified, had no idea what was going on, and somehow managed to get through that week as well. But I came out of that inspired to maybe do another rally race of some sort. And we were actually supposed to be in Baja doing one right around now. The Baja Rally, and with COVID, it was too difficult to get down there. So yeah, maybe a rally. I don't know. Like as far as Dakar goes, I'm interested because there's nothing else like it. I don't, and I'm not searching for like, I don't know. I'm not searching for like, I'm not a summit chaser. Like I'm not trying to go get like the 7 summits of motorcycle riding just so I can brag to friends about doing it. Right. Like that's not what it's about. It's more about the experience. And there's no other rally race that's as long and as challenging as a Dakar. So that would be what it is. Like Morocco is 5 days, and they do some in Russia. And there's a Sonora rally that's a 5-dayer. And so like, those are good races, good challenging races, no doubt. But to go and do a 14 days or, back when Lawrence did it, I think it was 21 days, like just insane.
God.
So yeah, there's something about it. I don't know. And I'm right now I'm kind of focused on a bit more of the hard enduro stuff until my body tells me I can't do that anymore. And then maybe I'll transition to rally. I'm not sure. We will see.
No doubt.
The only thing I can guarantee, Bruce, is there will be something on my calendar every year that kind of keeps me focused and training, and hopefully it's something with 2 wheels.
Yeah, well, and there's some more of that wisdom I mentioned earlier. I think you're right. That is the way to go. That is the way to keep going. Well, Scott, this has just been amazing, and you've been so generous with your time this morning. Because as I said earlier, I know you've got a lot of irons in the fire. So thank you.
No worries. Thanks a lot for having me. It's refreshing to talk motorcycles rather than hockey.
Well, you got my number.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been a fun change of topic. So I appreciate you having me on as a guest, and thank you very much.
Well, it's a pleasure. I hope we'll connect in person one of these days. And if you ever need a pair of hands at one of your events, look me up. And in the meantime, ride safe out there.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Bruce. Appreciate it.
Bye now.
Bye.
Scrolling through Instagram the other day, I saw a quote fly by that I had seen 100 times before, and you have probably seen it too. Except that this time I had just finished my conversation with Scott Thornton and was still processing it, so it felt like a bit of a message. The quote is from a speech by Teddy Roosevelt, and it's often called the man in the arena. It's a little long, so bear with me, and let's assume that if Roosevelt were saying these things today, the person in the arena could be anyone. And the quote goes like this: "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who actually does strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." End quote. And it occurred to me that I probably can't write a better concluding thought than that. Riding dirt bikes in all its various forms ends up having some custody of the soul of motorcycling because it's so focused on the doing. At its core, it's less about the abstraction of measurement, less about tenths of seconds, and more about whether or not something has simply been overcome, which in turn means that the glory is in the trying. Well, that's where it began for all of us, it seems to me. And if recapturing that feeling requires nothing more than one more motorcycle and a way to get it to the trailhead, then maybe the question isn't why 46.5% more of us bought dirt bikes last year. Maybe the question is, what took us so long? Well, thanks for listening. You'll find show notes for this episode at thismotorcyclelife.com. That's also how you can reach me if you have questions, comments, or suggestions. Emailing me at thismotorcyclelife@gmail.com works too, and I'd love to hear your stories. And you can still find me lurking on Instagram from time to time, where I'm at thismotolife, and where you'll also find many of the people I've interviewed for this podcast, including Scott Thornton. I have to say, looking for this episode's playlist recommendation led me down an excellent rabbit hole. It turns out that motocross playlists are a thing, a very popular thing. A lot of that music, though, is pretty thrashy and high energy, and I didn't really trust my taste. So, instead, I thought maybe something from the heart of our own dirt bike country would stand in nicely, and that's how I found an emerging band called Ontarians. One of its founding members hails from Collingwood, close to home for both Scott Thornton and me, and all of them come from the kind of wide-open country that makes things like riding a dirt bike in your backyard possible. The band, again, is Ontarians, and the track is called No Regrets. Buy it or stream it wherever you like to get your music, and in the meantime, keep staying alive out there.
Times are coming, trouble troubles are behind. I've done a little damage to myself, I've been unkind. Made a few decisions I wish I could forget. Burned my share of bridges, but I still have no regrets, no regrets at all. Guilt became a burden to my mind, I will confess. Stumbled through the dark, all those nights I was a mess. I loved my share of lovers,